The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves and rogues and adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. The Gospel inspired by God. Life on planet Earth is about 3.7 billion years old. And initially there were just basic single-celled protozoa, maybe a few different kinds. But for almost 1.5 billion years, there was almost no evolution on the planet. Just basically these few life forms, single-cell creatures, just self-cloning, self-replicating. And so it looked pretty much the same for the first 1.5 billion years. And then something extraordinary happened. The first incidents of sex happened on the planet, and they began to trade their genetic material with each other. And now life took off in a plethora of different forms. And so it began to multiply at an extraordinary rate. When you can share genes between different life forms, then you get a whole bunch of different possibilities. And so that led to the whole notion of mating. And mating results in extraordinary pluriformity of life forms, even within a single species. You look at our own species, there's about 7 billion of us on the planet, and there are almost no 2 people who are identical. And so because of this extraordinary trading of genetic material and environmental circumstance, even within a species, you get all these pluriformity of possibilities. But it came very, very late on, so you started off with just basically single-cell creatures who were self-cloning, and then there was some form of, sexuality, and then there was mating. But marriage was only invented about 3,800 BC. It was invented by the Sumerians. And so before that, there was no idea of marriage. There was mating going on, obviously, but there was no idea of marriage. So it was the Sumerians who invented marriage as a kind of a contract between men and women. So before that, basically, it was the village that raised the babies. So obviously mating was happening, but the progeny of this mating was, regarded as this was the job of the village to raise these babies who were created. So the Sumerians are the ones who gave us marriage as a contract, and they created divorce as a contract, and they created adoption as a contract. Now the problem is the word contract, because so very, very often marriage can descend into becoming merely a contract. I do A, B, C for you, and you do X, Y, Z for me. And if you're not doing A, B, C for me, I'm not going to do X, Y, Z for you. And so the notion that marriage is a contract rather than a loving commitment between two partners can lead to lots of difficulties. Now, this is precisely what Jesus is talking about today, because it's the same with our relationship with God. Very, very often, we have reduced our relationship to God to a contract. So we do A, B, C for God, and God is expected to do X, Y, Z for us. And this is what Christ is talking about today, that our relationship with God cannot be that of a contract, which was the notion of the Pharisee. The Pharisee's notion was God made a covenant with Moses about 1250 BC, and God insisted that we had keep 613 precepts of his, and then he would bless us, he'd make us a chosen race, and he'd give us a promised land, and he'd give us longevity in the land, and he'd give us lots of kids. So that was the contract. And so here's the Pharisee fastidiously keeping all these enactments, and thinking thus he was forcing God to honor his part of the contract. Christ saying it's not like that. Our relationship with God is not a contract or a covenant. It's a love relationship. In this instance, not so much between husband and wife as between, father and children. It's the love that exists between parents and kids, or even sometimes even more obviously, between grandparents and grandkids. This total commitment and this love that God has for us, and the extraordinary delight and curiosity that the little ones take in the parents and the grandparents. That's what he's talking about this morning. And so when you look at what we've done to this relationship that we have with God, we've imposed all these human categories on source. We have reduced God to a law maker and a law enforcer and a law punisher. And as far as I'm concerned, God hasn't created any of these laws. The laws of morality are simply agreements that human communities make with each other in order to run community affairs seamlessly. They're good. Some of them are good, and some of them are pathetic. We've multiplied laws until there are literally millions of laws in the statute books right now. The average American commits a felony once a day, literally. If you knew all of the laws in this country, which there are hundreds of thousands at this stage, you're committing a felony at least once a day, but you're not totally unaware of it. So we have multiplied laws until they're absolutely ridiculous. God does not create laws. Apart from how the universe itself works, there are mathematical laws like the law of gravity or conservation of energy, and there are kind of laws of karma and laws of love, but they're built into the fabric of the universe. They're not created by human beings and imposed on society. So the first thing we've done, to dishonor God is to make God into a law creator, a law enforcer, and a law punisher. The second thing is to make God into a person, as if God was some, human being sitting on a throne someplace in the sky, looking suspiciously like us, with all of our virtues writ large and all of our vices writ large. So God is not a person. We have made God into a creator, that God sits down in his workshop and decides to make, gorillas today and elephants tomorrow and human beings the day after and daffodils on the fourth day. God does not create ex nihilo. So there was a great debate way back 1,500 years ago between two great theologians, one of whom was claiming that in creatio ex nihilo, that God created things out of nothing. And the other one said, no, it's not creatio ex nihilo, it is emanatio ab Deo. It is emanation from God. That God's very nature is to emanate life forms. And so that life comes out of God, not in discrete acts of creation from nothing, but that the essence of God itself pours itself out into manifestation. And I've used this example with you a few times before. Somebody gave me a gift of a flower pot with a bulb in it some years ago. And given my posture for, not being able to look after life forms, I kill it by overwatering it or by forgetting to water it. The injunction I got was, stick your finger in the soil. If it's moist, leave it alone. If it's dry, put water in it. And so I did that for several months. And one day I saw this green shoot coming up where the bulb had been. This long green stalk over the course of about a week. And then about 2 weeks later, these 4 beautiful big trumpet flowers began to emerge from it. And for me, that became an image that is the nature of God. It was the nature of the bulb to give birth to the stalk, and it was the nature of the stalk to give birth to the 4 great trumpet flowers. It wasn't that the bulbs decided one day, I wonder what would happen if I created a stalk, or for the stalk to say, I wonder what would happen if I created 4 trumpet flowers. It wasn't an act of creation from nothing, it was the emanation of the essence of the stuff. So for me, that is what God is, that all of manifestation is actually just emerging from the very nature of God herself, that she's not making discrete acts of bringing things out of nothing just for the sheer fun of it. And certainly God is not a micromanager. We sometimes think that God is involved in everything. And it amuses me when I see 2 boxers who are beating the crap out of each other for 15 rounds, and then one guy wins and he says, God did it. As if God is saying, I'm in favor of the guy in the blue shorts in this round, and I'm going to give the victory to him. I'm really believing that God intervened and made me the champion in this particular fight. So the idea that God micromanages our affairs, nothing could be further from the truth. Or even the idea that God is partisan, that somehow the God of all that is looked down into the multitude of multiverses and picked out this one little universe that says, I love this universe especially. And then looked into this universe in which there are 150 billion galaxies and said, and my favorite galaxy is the Milky Way galaxy. I really love the Milky Way galaxy. I'm really happy with that one. And then with the Milky Way galaxy, with its 200 billion solar systems, he picked out this one particular solar system and says, and I really love that solar system. And then of the planets in attendance in the solar system. And this planet, I love this little planet. I'm going to call it Earth. And this planet that's revolving, of all the millions of species of life in that, I particularly like Homo sapiens sapiens. And of Homo sapiens sapiens sapiens, of all the tribes living on this, 7,000 different tribes, I like these particular people, and I'm going to have a special relationship with these people. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that is how God operates. That God doesn't love all manifestation, unconditionally in that way. And so this, it seems to me, is what Christ is inviting us into today, to radically examine the relationship we have with God, and to take it out of the realm of being a contract, a kind of a business arrangement where we do our part and God does his part. That it's a love affair between the manifestor, the emanator, and that which manifests or emanates. Prayer of petition, as far as I'm concerned, is a kind of a projective phenomenon. So, if I want to see a movie, there's two ways I can watch a movie. I can go into the theatre and I can look at the screen up there, and I'm getting these 40-foot by 30-foot images, where John Wayne is riding across the stage on a horse, and so I can watch it up there. But that's actually an illusion, because there's nothing happening up there. Or I can go back up into the projectionist box and then look at this celluloid roll of film, and I can go through it frame by frame by frame. I'm seeing the same movie, but it's a radically different experience. It's very difficult to see a little 1 inch by 1 inch frame, and to do it one by one by one, it's going to take me 4 or 5 days to see the movie. And I'm going to get no sense of, movement or change or whatever. But if I run it through a reel and shine a light through it and project it out, I'm going to get this huge image that's moving, and changing radically. So we tend to do the same thing with our own needs. We've got the screen that we call God, and we project our needs onto God in order to be able to see them clearly. It's only to see them clearly. But God is only a device that we're using to project our needs onto and our hopes onto, but God resides inside in every single one of us. And so it is the God within us that's going to make things turn out the way they do, given the choices we make and given the environments in which we find ourselves. So we're actually praying to the God within. But most of us don't believe that God lives within. We think God is outside us. And so we're using this as a screen to project our stuff so we can see clearly what's in here in the tiny little microfilm. So prayer of petition is simply the laserization of human intentionality. That's what it is. It is our intentionality that is changing the outcome. It is not that God is indulging the prayers of holy people to kind of influence the outcome of a boxing match, or an examination result, whatever. We're creating through our own intentionality as individuals and as a combined group. So imagine a huge big rock set in the middle of a field, and we're trying to move this rock. And everybody in the church here this morning attaches a rope to it, but we're all pulling it in different directions. Now, according to mathematics, vector mathematics can tell you, if you know exactly the pressure the force each person is extending on the rope and the direction in which they're pulling it, you can tell exactly which way the rock is going to move and at what speed it's going to move by summing the vectors till exactly. So you can attach human intentionality to any issue, like the elections. There's all these people attaching, their ideas to elections. Which way is the election going to go to? If you sum the vectors, you'll find exactly who's going to win this election. If you knew, the hearts of every American who's going to be voting, and if you know what pressure they're going to extend and what direction they're pulling, you can tell immediately who's going to get elected to what office. And so it's the combined intentionality of the group that actually affects the final outcome of it. But we think that God is doing this and God is playing favorites and God is, answering our petition. God as transcendent, other is not involved in this at all. It's the God within each one of us that's exerting the forces, and summing those forces tells you what the outcome is going to look like. We're energy beings, and we're directing energy at each other. So when we pray for any outcome, we're directing energy. That's the rope we're attaching to the outcome, to the desired outcome. And it is really powerful. We're energy beings, and we're radiating energy at each other. And when you get energies in resonance with each other, you amplify the wave. It's like, imagine a little kid on a swing. And if you know how to move the swing properly, when the swing comes right back to its end point and you push, then you can begin to amplify it. And if you do it properly, you can make the kid do a flip over the top. If you push too soon when it's coming back, or you push too late when it's going away from you, you're not going to amplify the wave. And so human intentionality literally creates a brainwave, literally. So if you're meditating with a group of people, literally what happens is your brain waves get into synchronization and they affect an extraordinary outcome on the immediate environment. And so we're energy beings, literally directing packets of energy at the objects of our intention, and that's the effect of prayer.